Hey guys, first off, my apologies on getting the review out a little later than normal. I was away from my desktop the last few days. I did get to watch the episode on Thursday when it aired, but I wasn't near my computer at all to discuss it. But I really wanted to discuss it. When I reviewed Once Upon a Time, I started that around Season 4. I made sure I reviewed every episode of Season 4, 5, 6, and 7, even if the review came out a few days later. The same thing is going to apply with Grey's Anatomy. Grey's Anatomy is going to become the staple video of this channel, the staple show of this channel that I discuss. So I want to make sure every episode gets reviewed. And tonight's episode is Anybody Have a Map, and Krista Vernoff's directorial debut. And I have to say, she used some very, very, how do I word it? I want to make sure it's done politely. She used many, many standard Disney Pixar directorial techniques, and I could tell that she was coached by someone at Disney proper or Disney Pixar, because she used a technique particularly towards the middle of the episode that I was like, this is such a classic Disney Pixar move. Don't get me wrong, it was good, and I really liked this episode. In fact, what got me about this episode was the fact that I liked it so much more than I liked last week's episode, which was weird because the trailer for episode 6 I was so excited for. I thought it had a lot of really cool plot points. I was so excited for the Teddy, Owen, and Amelia storyline to be discussed. And the only thing about episode 6 that I happened to like was the end. And that was really frustrating because the end I also felt was using Disney Pixar techniques, which is where they are just forcing you to be sad. I mean, it made sense because they're bringing up all the nostalgia of the previous characters that have died. I talked about that in my review. But this episode, minus doing that particular technique, I thought was just constructed so much better than last week's episode. And I really, really liked it. So let's discuss this episode. So this episode had only 3 storylines as opposed to the normal Grey's Anatomy 4 storylines or 5 storylines with 2 sub-storylines happening at the same time. And I have to say, I think that's a really smart choice for Grey's Anatomy going forward. Grey's Anatomy is an ensemble cast show, so you have a lot of characters doing different things at once. But I think what really benefited this episode was you only had, Meredith in her storyline, and then you had Richard in his storyline, and then you had Maggie and Jackson in their storyline. Now, obviously, you have guest stars as well, but Greg Germain is a guest star. He's not a main character, and the same applies to Debbie Allen. Debbie Allen does feel like a sort of main character at this point because she's so embedded into the show's canon, but she is just a guest star. So I really like the fact that you only had 4 main characters in this episode, and it was really cool. And I would suggest that Grey's Anatomy does that going forward, just to trim down the amount of characters per episode, so that way the storylines can really hit home. And speaking of hitting close to home, Catherine is super sick. But the one thing about Catherine being super sick I didn't like was the fact that she didn't tell Richard. I thought that was really, really stupid. Like, Meredith even harped on that, because Meredith talked about her mother, Alice, who was sick with Alzheimer's and hid that from everyone. And, this show, it deals with real world issues many times. And these characters have seen the consequences of, hiding secrets or, keeping secrets. And Meredith called Catherine out, and I really like that. Also, Meredith wore red for a majority of this episode. I gotta say, red is Ellen Pompeo's color. She looked fantastic. So I really like the bonding scenes between Catherine and Meredith. I thought they were really well done. I think Debbie Allen is a fantastic actress. Ellen Pompeo is also a fantastic actress. So I really just felt the chemistry and the dynamics going on in those particular scenes. I thought it was really well done. And the same thing honestly applies to Ellen Pompeo and Greg Germain. Quite frankly, if for some reason she gets over her disgust with Karasik and Meredith likes Karasik, I think that'd be okay. I could see that happening. There's something there. I also just think that there's a really good chemistry there. He's funny, and Meredith can get over his disgust, I guess, his disgusting moments. Now, there's one other thing this episode really had, and it was tension. Every storyline had tension throughout it, and I gotta say, I felt the tension, like knowing if Catherine will be sick, what's going to happen with Catherine, and the tension continued with Catherine being sick because now she is diagnosed, and there's going to be a lot of drama down the road. And Debbie Allen is probably going to be pushed because she's going to have to act sick in many episodes going forward. And then poor James Pickens Jr. is going to have to deal with that as well because his wife is going to be super sick. I hope that they're not planning on killing Catherine off. I don't think that would be really smart going forward. So that was the first storyline, and I really liked it. And then you have Richard's storyline. And Richard's storyline is where I felt that Krista Vernoff really decided to use the Disney Pixar method of eliciting fake sadness. So you have this nurse, Frankie, and the bond between Richard and Frankie is acted to be adorable, and I understood it. But we've never seen Frankie before. And they also wanted to show us the connection between the nurses at Grace Sloan. And you rarely ever see that. They use nurses as one-off characters many times, or not tokenism, as a token character in the sense like, okay, we're just going to use this one nurse for like this little storyline, and then we'll be done with them. They did that with the nurse that gave everyone syphilis, and they did that with the nurse that allowed Bailey was having sex with before she met Ben. So they did things like that with the nurses, and you don't see the nurse dynamic because the show is focused on the doctors, so there's no time to focus on the subset of medical providers, which would be the nurses here. So I understood what they were doing. It made sense from a directing and writing perspective. It's totally fine. But when you have a show, you need to flesh this out. And this is the issue that I had with Richard's storyline, because it's trying to show us this amazing bond that these two have. Frankie, the actress, was great. But you're showing us this amazing bond, but I've never once seen it. So when she died, and the tension was there in the surgery, like I half expected them to keep her alive. But the tension, as I said, the tension was there. But when she died and they used that sad music, again, quite a Grey's Anatomy trope, but also a Disney Pixar trope to use sad music and have sad reactions to someone dying that you don't know who they are. Like Denny Duquette, when he died, that was much more impactful than when Frankie died. And then Richard, and then the story really focused on Richard and how he dealt with Frankie's death. And again, I understood what Krista Vernoff was doing, and I really do think that she had some really good coaching. But I think that if you wanted Frankie to die, you needed to introduce her 3 episodes earlier. Maybe introduce her when you introduced Cece, and then have her die that way. I think that would have made more sense. So then we have Richard, grieving, and then he goes to AA. And James Pickett Jr., he's a fantastic actor. Like, he really gets into it, and I love it. And then he goes to destroy the bar because we learn that a bartender is taking people's, he's offering, drinks in exchange for drug addict chips. And that sets Richard off, and he destroys the bar. Now, I have to say, I was really, really hoping that Richard does get some comeuppance. I get why he did it, but it was vigilante acts, and vigilante acts, unless you're Batman, honestly, aren't gonna fly. And I was happy that he got arrested. Not because I wanted the character to be arrested, but I'm just glad that the writing didn't gloss it over. So I think it just added to the writing that they're keeping it real. Sometimes Grey's Anatomy, will go in the more fantasy version of medicine, for television purposes. But I was quite happy that they kept that real, that he was arrested. But what really bugged me was the fact that he told Meredith not to tell Catherine. Ugh, whatever. Secrets are bad. Secrets and lies are what leads to drama, what leads to, us being entertained as the audience. But there's so many points where you're like, come on, just tell us, and let's deal with the consequences as opposed to holding the secret close to the vest. Teddy and Owen is one of them. So then we have the Jaggy storyline, and I really felt it was unnecessary, and there was no need to add extra drama to the show because you already have the love triangle storyline. There's no real reason to break up Jackson and Maggie. But I will say I really enjoyed Kelly McCreary's acting. I felt her pain. Like when she was repeating what he was saying and Jackson was going, "Why are you repeating what I'm saying?" She's like, I don't know. And I thought that was great because she's still being funny. She's still able to get a little bit of humor into a really, really sad moment. So Kelly McCreary really did make these scenes. Not saying Jesse Williams is a bad actor, but I was on Kelly McCreary's side the entire time. But there was one point in the scene where Jackson was criticizing Maggie, and I'm like, where are these criticisms coming from, dude? Like, this is totally uncalled for. And then when Maggie got jealous of him talking to April, I was like, whoa, that's also not right because, April is the mother of Jackson's baby, and Jackson and April have this really long history. Like, if they had to break up and Jackson was like, all right, I'm going back to April, and then poor Matthew and April break up too, and they decide to bring back Sarah Drew, that would be a lot of drama. It'd be fun to watch, but it would make sense because it would allow the Japril shippers to be happy, and it makes sense in a grand spectrum as well. But also, you know, you grieve the loss of love, which was the loss of Jackson and April, and then you move on, and now they have Jaggy, and Jaggy's a great couple. I really think they work well together, though. And then there's still the fun, you know, their parents are married gimmick that's going on there. So I have to say, I like Jackson's Crisis of Fate storyline, but I wish that it didn't have to impact their relationship overall. But anyway, so the three storylines are really good, and the one thing I liked about all three is only two of them intersected. We have Meredith's storyline intersecting with Richard's at the end, where Richard is calling her and keeping the gimmick of secrets going on, and the tension as, you know, what's Catherine going to do with Richard being in jail? How's Meredith going to tell Richard that Catherine is sick? And then, you know, Catherine did try to tell Richard, but he was already arrested. So I like that those two storylines came together, but essentially the storylines with their children, because minus Meredith, this episode was really the Avery Weber family going on for all the drama here. And Meredith is sort of inducted into the Weber family herself. It's actually pretty interesting how connected these characters are on a legal level and a biological, personal level. And I really did like that. So, but no one knows what's happening with Maggie and Jackson. I mean, technically, Maggie went back to Meredith's house, but Meredith didn't see her because Meredith wasn't there. So I like the fact that, you know, Maggie didn't get to talk about her relationship with Jackson right away, but you at least, and it keeps a little bit of the tension separate. And I like the fact that all those storylines don't need to convalesce at the end. So overall, I would say the three storylines was really good for pacing. I think it really added to the drama and the tension of the episode. And that's the tension was definitely the theme of this episode. And as I also said earlier, I really would suggest that going forward. I'm just looking at my notes to make sure I have my last few thoughts wrapped up. But another thing I really liked about this episode, was it really didn't need to be overly political or focusing on other major representation issues that Grey's Anatomy can rightfully do as a show that reaches out to so many people and is so representative. It's fantastic. But like last week you had Alex talk about voting. But again, that's a thing that would only make sense in the United States at this particular moment in time. Like if that aired this week, it wouldn't make sense because voting's done. Then you have the massive amounts of queer baiting with Alex Landy and Glasses. And we're going to talk about the queer baiting in the trailer for next week's episode because it's annoying. And that'll be its own separate video. But I just liked how it focused on the core cast, the core issues, and there's more drama coming forward from it. The only thing about the episode I didn't like was the lack of Owen and Amelia, but it looks like in the mid-season finale that'll be discussed as well. So anyway, I really thought Anybody Have a Map was a fantastic piece of television, and I really liked it. It's a 4.5 out of 5 for me, which is really interesting because I was really, really confused about my thoughts for this episode. And what I mean by that is, the trailer had me kind of like, what's going on here? Like, I don't know if I'm really going to like it or whatnot. And I ended up loving it. I think it's one of the strongest episodes of the season. I think Krista Vernoff is for her first directorial debut. That sentence is ridiculous. For her first time directing, she did really good. And I really want to see more of that. And I also really want to see more episodes where the cast is kind of just slimmed down. Not cutting characters from the show overall, but just episodes where there's less. And they did that in season 14 as well. And I think it's a really good way to allow for more drama, more storylines, and more acting to be done. So anyway, share your thoughts about this episode in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching my review of it, and we'll talk real soon about Grey's Anatomy. All right, guys.